It's primary season, which means a bunch of politicians are about to give a lot of publicity to just a small handful of states.
Thank you, Iowa.
We move on from Iowa to New Hampshire into the other states.
Thank you, Iowa.
And we go to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan.
But despite the frequent trips to snowy New Hampshire or the constant canvassing in the cornfields of Iowa, there's one state you don't hear a lot about during the presidential primary season, even though it has the most people, creates the most jobs, and is among the most diverse economies in North America, California. With nearly 20 million registered voters and 416 pledged delegates up for grabs, you'd think the Golden State would be the crown jewel of the 2020 campaign trail. And yet, Iowa and New Hampshire dominate candidates' travel budgets and schedules, even though they only combine for 75 delegates between them. Yes, the California primary accounts for roughly 11% of all the delegates at play for Democrats. And still, it hasn't made much news since 1968, when Bobby Kennedy all but secured the nomination and was tragically assassinated just a few minutes later. Why does the home of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and the environmental movement play second fiddle to some of the smallest states in the union? It all boils down to scheduling. Traditionally, the California primary is held in June, well after enough momentum and consensus have built up to pick the party's nominee. But not this year. In September 2017, the California State House voted to move the 2020 primary to Super Tuesday on March 3rd. Truly a primetime primary.
No offense to any other state, I think we're just as important as Iowa and New Hampshire.
California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara authored the primetime primary bill while he was in the state Senate.
California's primary should not be all the way to June when the candidates already decided. I mean, California is the largest state, and I would argue the most powerful state in the union. We should be, our primary should be prime time, right? With
primetime
Super
primary.
Tuesday, exactly.
What were some of the hurdles and challenges when it came to authoring this bill and getting it passed?
Well, you know, a lot of people said it's very expensive to campaign in California. And trust me, I just won a statewide election race. I know it's expensive.
Just why? Because it's so big?
It's a massive state.
Okay.
You know, TV's expensive here. But the other thing is, look, you're gonna have to eventually campaign in California, whether you're from New York, Texas, or here. So it's gonna be costly. Why not, you know, make sure we have that conversation early on with voters here in California to help you set the tone for the rest of the country.
And the candidates are taking note. Most of the top contenders are already flocking west, and not just for the traditional Hollywood fundraisers we've grown used to. California Democratic spokesperson Roger Salazar thinks the shift will force candidates to reconsider their approach to the state.
When you think about states like Iowa and New Hampshire, you're thinking about a lot of retail politics. You're thinking about door-to-door canvassing. You're thinking about a lot of town halls. You're thinking about that sort of thing. In California, you have a lot of the same sort of features, only in a much larger geographic area. So you've got to do some of that, as well as figuring out how to sort of mass communicate in the best way possible.
And they already are. Senator Bernie Sanders is publicly acknowledging the new state of play with early trips to UCLA and San Diego.
Wow, there are more people here than in the state of Vermont. Thank you.
And Mayor Pete Buttigieg is already trading in small-town South Bend, Indiana, for the bright lights of Bill Maher's Hollywood soundstage. But of the over a dozen contenders running for president, only one threatens to end the California primary before a single ballot is even cast. And she knew just where to publicly stake her claim.
I am so proud to be a daughter of Oakland, California.
California's junior senator and former three-term elected state attorney general Kamala Harris launching her White House bid on the steps of Oakland City Hall. One significant barrier still stands for the Oakland native.
California is not a winner-take-all state.
Even if Harris runs up the score for a commanding California victory, there are still plenty of delegates to go around. But can California's newfound importance to the 2020 primary schedule actually change the type of candidate who might wind up as the party's nominee? John Opdyke is the president of Open Primaries and thinks California's contest will benefit candidates at the front lines of progressive social and economic issues.
Housing, economic development, climate change. These are immigration. These are issues that resonate very strongly in California, and I think the voters there are going to be looking for candidates that can speak to those issues.
California is also an open primary, which means independents are welcome to vote in the election, as opposed to a closed primary, which only allows registered party members to cast ballots.
The Democratic Party has opened their presidential primary so that the 5 million independent voters in California can participate. That could potentially have a very big impact on who wins the Democratic primary and gets most of those delegates.
It could also have an impact on voter turnout. More competitive races tend to create more engaged voters. And we've seen this before in California. The last time California moved up its primary date was in February 2008, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were fighting for the Democratic nomination. Nearly 5 million votes were cast, the most for the state's Democratic primary since 1980. But look who won, Hillary Clinton by 8%. Not exactly a bellwether of where things were heading that year. But will we ever see a future where California joins the ranks of Iowa and New Hampshire as a predictive early primary state?
I always like to say, whether you like it or not, California is coming to a neighborhood near you.
So whether you're first in line for the Iowa State Fair or you have a front row seat to the season's first debate in Miami, you'll still be able to see the bright lights of the 2020 California Democratic primary shining from sea to shining sea.